was starting to outperform Bitcoin, which we've usually seen is the trend in other market cycles where Bitcoin will lead the way in a bull market. It'll go through that price discovery phase. And then after time, the gains and profits that people make from Bitcoin trickle down into the altcoin space. And we've actually, we were questioning whether that would actually even happen this cycle because Bitcoin was just so far and away outperforming every other asset. But we're actually starting to see the trends and signs of that actually now happening. It's far outperformed Bitcoin over the last month and a half. We've seen it trickle down into other altcoins as well. You mentioned XRP. There's a whole bunch of narrative around that. And obviously the SEC appeal getting dropped was big for its price performance. But even that is starting to, was rising to its all-time high. Now, as you mentioned, over the last week, we have seen a bit of regression in price, which honestly in crypto cycles is very natural and actually healthy for the space. We don't always want our asset prices just to continue to keep going up because we need that natural flush out in the market. But it also is impacted by, what we're seeing in terms of inflation metrics and things like that, which, unfortunately, traditional finance and the actual overall macro economy can still impact crypto assets and prices. And so that's, one of the key reasons we've seen a dip over the last sort of week. But the funny thing and something that I think is an interesting sort of narrative or even just information point to be across is that Bitcoin, as you mentioned, still hit its all-time high again sort of last week, and that is usually quite rare. Usually Bitcoin will go on its run and then it will outperform or consolidate and stay around the same rate. But Bitcoin's still in its price discovery mode as well, which I think is ultimately quite bullish for the space in general. That Bitcoin is still leading the way, even though we're starting to get this altcoin performance. But it also probably speaks as well to that ETF adoption that is very new to this cycle. ETFs for Bitcoin and ETH, this is really the first bull market that we've had them. And I just think it'll change the way that this cycle performs and what we see from it. Both in the positive, I think it'll create greater volatility for the asset and the upward trend, but also maybe when we go into a bear market, we maybe see further dumping from traditional investors as well. So ultimately, I think it's very bullish. We could touch on maybe some of the stuff we're seeing at a government level in terms of, we saw an executive order by Trump the other week around 401k adoption. Paul Atkins, the new SEC chair, has now introduced Project Crypto. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can talk about and the benefits that will have on the space. But I think if we're talking about it from a pure price prediction or price performance indicator within the market, it's all very positive. And I think we've got definitely legs to run within Q4 and Q1 next year. Obviously not financial advice, but that's certainly my belief in terms of where we're at in the market cycle.
Yeah, that's great. And I think historically, the fall tends to be a good time for crypto. It's kind of weird how, seasons of the year tend to affect that, but we have 10 plus years to look back on now. And I think I'm correct in that usually the fall is pretty bullish for crypto. So I think we got that coming up, which is great. And then, let's talk about some of the government stuff because, obviously crypto is worldwide, but the US is the market leader and, of course, probably, carries the biggest influence. So, gosh, it just seems to me like everything is kind of all poised to hit at the same time, kind of that September timeframe, maybe September to October, but we got the Genius Act passed into law. We've got Market Clarity Act comes next, and it looks like the House and Senate are going to get that done, hopefully in September. You mentioned Paul Atkins, the new SEC chair. He's coming in, and basically he's a total reversal on everything Gary Gensler had done, trying to stop the market. Now it's full steam ahead because that's what his boss, President Trump, has made very clear. So he's putting that into place. And he's been a big crypto guy anyway, so he was the right guy to come in there. We got that hitting. We've got ETF approvals that probably follow the Market Structure Act. We've got, you mentioned the SEC case against Ripple has been dropped. What else? Oh, probably rate cuts. The rest of the world is cutting rates, but the U.S. hasn't yet. Looks like we're poised maybe for one or more rate cuts in September. I just can't believe all this stuff hits at the same time. And you're talking about room to move to the upside. Sure looks like it to me.
Yeah, someone explained it or described it to me as a dam wall. And I think we're certainly feeling that in terms of just all the exciting innovation, initiatives and legislation that is looking to get passed. You mentioned Paul Atkins, the new SEC chair. I was discussing with this someone the other day, like just the difference in that alone, where Gary Gensler's taking crypto protocols and businesses to court and trying to shut them down, versus the new SEC chair in the space of 6 months that is not only pro crypto, but is actually putting his money where his mouth is and introducing new executive orders, introducing new projects like Project Crypto, which will be huge for tokenization assets. Even that is looking to impact the traditional finance world in terms of how shares are bought and sold, how settlement is done. Ultimately, we're seeing the technology of blockchain and crypto as a whole start to really find its way within traditional finance as well. As I mentioned before, 401ks, to actually sign an executive order from Trump to allow people to put their retirement savings into digital assets, I think is a huge step forward. Obviously, the retirement savings space is $1 trillion industry, right? So even if it's just a percentage of that is now getting invested into these assets, I think is ultimately very bullish for this space. It also just allows people to understand what is crypto if they start to have exposure to it within their retirement savings, which is ultimately the biggest thing, in my opinion, is that we're getting increased adoption throughout the world, throughout maybe our older generation as well, who become more knowledgeable about this space, who start to use the assets or at least have an interest in it because they're invested in it. There are some questions around, and I think that'll get ironed out around, well, what digital assets can I invest in with my 401k? I can't imagine they'll be too volatile, because if you can invest in some random meme coin or even say Dogecoin, for example, and we go into a bear market and all of a sudden that's down 50%, which does happen with meme coins, I think there'll be a bit of pushback with that. So I imagine that will all get ironed out.
You mean I can't buy fart coin in my 401k?
That's probably the example I should have given that I think would be pretty funny. I imagine it'll be more on the legitimate blue collar, blue chip assets, but we'll wait and see on that, because I think it will be interesting if there is flexibility around what assets you can actually put your retirement savings into. So I think all of that is ultimately very exciting for the space. And look, I think if you'd mentioned this to someone last year before Trump got into power, would be stoked, would be over the moon with some of the. There's one thing to say that they're a pro-crypto administration, but then to actually start to enact legislation, to put things in place to really support and help this industry grow, I think is a really exciting time to be in this space.
Yeah, I mean, we hear promises all the time from politicians and political campaigns, and then nothing ever changes.
Too true.
Yeah, but I mean, to actually see it, I mean, it's happening at lightning speed too. I mean, I think we're just over 6 months in, and I don't know how many executive orders we've had on crypto, and the Genius Act actually making it through Congress and getting signed into law. That's not an easy thing to do. So yeah, you're right. It's been tremendous. And I think sometimes people are just so burned out that, it's another promise, but it's not going to happen. But it's happening here. And it's almost like, I almost think, there's that big chart, market cycle chart that people have, the different phases of a market. And there's the disbelief phase. And I almost think that's what we're in right now. It's like, we were so demoralized by 4 years of Biden and Gensler that the fact that all of these things are happening right now, it's almost like people can't quite yet believe it. And I think they will soon, but it's, the move from 70,000 Bitcoin to 124,000 has been great. But I mean, I think there's so much more upside at some point to hit. Jim, you mentioned the 401ks, and someone described to me, not that it's any big secret, but I just never really thought about it before, that the 401k investments for the stock market, and of course we've had dips in the stock market. We always will. We've had some crashes, the 2008, the COVID crash, but there is, this person described to me that the impact that 401k buying has had on the stock market it's like this ever rising floor that just constantly props the stock market up. Because if you think about it, everyone's, most people get paid every 2 weeks in the United States. I don't know how it is there in Australia, but every week or every 2 weeks you get a paycheck, and a portion of that paycheck just automatically gets invested into your 401k. Yeah. And what that means is that it doesn't just go into your 401k, it goes into your account, and then they auto buy the stock market every 2 weeks. And so there's just this constant buying pressure that is never going away. It's only growing. And now for a chunk of that to start going into crypto, I really don't think people are prepared for what that means.
No, it's a really great point. And look, we have the same thing here. We get paid monthly. Well, it depends on the business, but yeah, it's more so monthly here in Australia. But we have the exact same thing here. It's called our superannuation, and it's the exact same thing where a portion of our salary will get paid out into our superannuation account, and they're managing our accounts and buying, Australian shares, US shares. And so you're right. If only a little bit of a portion of that is going now to the crypto industry, I think that is going to be huge for the overall space. And as I mentioned, it's just great for adoption as well. If people can actually start to own Bitcoin, maybe it does really well for them. All of a sudden now they've got a great investment in this crypto asset. Okay, maybe I'll actually spend the time to learn a bit more about it and learn about the history. And I do find that anyone that actually takes the time to learn about this space, learn about how Bitcoin was actually built out of the financial crisis, the whole origin and lore of Satoshi, and then all of a sudden you go down the rabbit hole of, okay, well, what's this Ethereum thing? What's this XRP thing? I've always thought the banks should be, disrupted. All of a sudden you just get a really big interest for this space. And I think that's great for the overall adoption. It's great for innovation. The smarter people that are interested in this space that are working on it will create better use cases moving forward. So I think it does have a flow-on effect. And it ultimately does start with, do I have, even if it's a small investment into this asset, once you buy something, you have an inherent interest in it and it doing well, so you learn more about it. So I think this is incredibly bullish for the US economy and the US ecosystem. But as I always try and stress to our US friends that, look, a lot of other governments, I know the Australian government for sure, looks at what the US is doing as a bit of a role model in terms of, okay, how should we operate moving forward? And so I'm even more bullish that this will then flow into European governments, the Australian government, and the US will lead the way, but other governments will follow, which will have even greater, global impacts on this space.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, hopefully so. And a little change in roles there, because while we were essentially frozen for 4 years under Biden and Gensler, it was the rest of the world that kept crypto growing, and especially places like the UAE and Dubai, and so they led the way, and thankfully so. And then now maybe we can step back in and push it even farther forward. You mentioned Paul Atkins, our new SEC chair, and what he's labeled Project Crypto. I saw a quote or a story from him that said what they're working to do, among many other things. But one thing, and I love this because this is always my question or issue, is he said, we don't want to just do this through executive orders or through new directives at the SEC that can just be totally undone when the next administration comes in, whatever that may be. At some point, Democrats come back into office. We don't want to leave that door open. So he said one big thing he's doing with Project Crypto is, I think he called it future-proofing this, so that it's basically this system that they're setting up is protected and can't just be undone by someone in the future. And I thought that was so wonderful to hear. Kind of like the difference between an executive order here and an actual law that gets passed into effect. One is a lot more powerful than the other.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great point, because I feel like all the great things we've spoken about, the usual counter argument to all of that is, well, if a new administration comes in 3 years, they could just scrap it all. And I personally don't know how the laws and executive orders actually work in the US in terms of, once something's introduced and passed, is it safe moving forward? So that's really great to hear, because I think that's probably the one worry, that we have so much rate of progression in this next 3 or 4 years, and then things will change with the new administration. I'm also, though, personally of the belief, and I'd like to hear your take on this, that by the 3 years are up, so much would have been done, so many more new people have been introduced to this space, so much more capital has gone into it, that again, it's like that damn wall where, okay, and a new administration may not be as pro-crypto. I feel like no administration at this point can be anti-crypto, though. I feel like we'll be past that point. At least, that's my hopeful thinking. Maybe it's a bit wishful. But I do think that, the advancements we've seen in this 6 to 8 months has been significant. I can only imagine what this space will look like after sort of 3 or 4 years, and, the new players that will enter this space.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, it's the proverbial toothpaste has been squeezed out of the tube, and it's not going back in. I mean, even if you wanted to, you're not getting that back in the tube. I mean, really, I would say, and maybe you can comment on this, but I certainly am not an expert. I do study this a lot and I cover this a lot in the news, but everything I'm seeing, this is not a passing fad. This is not, it's not something small or something that is, like you said, is going to be able to be reversed in the next 3 years. This is, number one, it's a new asset class. We haven't had a new asset class since I think bonds came out in the 1600s or whatever. So it's a new asset class, but really from what I see is this is going to, it's not just going to be a parallel system. It's not going to be a new option. This is going to completely replace traditional finance, TradFi, as they say, right? It's going to, I don't think the banks are all going away. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think the way they operate, and, the SWIFT system is just one example, but taking 3 days to send money and costing a huge fee to wire money overseas, I think that all is going away. And all of the workings behind the scenes, it's either going to be blockchain or you're not going to be in business. I mean, I think it's going to be a complete overhaul. I'm not one of these Nasara, Jasara, the whole system's going down with the banks. I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think there's a brand new system being built, and it's not a parallel system. It's just going to replace the rails of what we have today.
I totally agree. And like the best example I could give like on the spot right now is I live in Australia. Most of my sort of inner workings and dealings as an individual and citizen here is with an Australian bank. Noah, you're based in the US. I imagine you use a US bank. If I wanted to just send you money right now, I can only imagine how long it's going to take me, how long it's going to cost. I'm going to have to transfer from Australian dollars into US dollars. That could take days and that could be tons of fees involved. Whereas if I wanted to do it on the blockchain, I could just get your wallet address. I could send you USDC and it'd be in your account in a couple of seconds. So that example alone, if I didn't explain anything else to someone, just mention that, especially for international transactions, they'd be like, yeah, the second option is way better than the first. Now, obviously, there's safeguards and things, and the space still needs to mature enough for that to be done on a global or even institutional level. We get that. But just that alone and that efficiency alone is quite obvious for most people. And I feel like we'll continue to get that. I agree that, the banks are probably not going anywhere, but they will definitely need to change how they operate as a business. The other thing that you mentioned around, like, this is no longer a fad. I think that's the best thing about this is that we're probably past that. I mean, we're definitely past that point where people used to say, Bitcoin's going to go to zero and it's a scam. We're definitely past that. And the reason that I think we'll be past that at a government level as well is that, look, a lot of these, both the US government, but a lot of now states in the US are starting to hold Bitcoin as a beginner on their balance sheet. So there's no way they can turn around and say, well, all these assets that we've held, and we've seen the German government do it and things like that. But once you're entrenched and you hold these assets on your balance sheets, it's not so easy to get rid of. As I mentioned, they'll have a direct financial incentive for the asset to do well. So I think we're well and truly past that point where this is considered a fad or it could go away under a new administration. I think now the benefits are so clear. And the asset class, as you mentioned, is a completely new asset that's valued in the trillions. Like, that is not going away. That's not a fad at this point. That's here to stay.
Well, and it's a great point, and it's at this point, sometimes you forget about hindsight, and things are very easy and quickly to be forgotten. But I'll tell you what, that was not so easy of a thing to say even a couple years ago. I mean, I started buying crypto in 2017, and people thought you were crazy. That people did say it's going to be banned by governments. There's no way they're going to let this live. You're buying tulip bulbs, and it's all going to go to zero. And and you know what? For a while, it was 50-50, right? I mean, they weren't wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I was 2017 as well, and I distinctly remember even telling like my dad, and he was like, "What are you doing? Just buy, just have fiat." Like, I just remember it, and all your friends think you're crazy, and I remember it distinctly. So, and you're exactly right.
And I mean, Bitcoin, huge drops in price. The entire market cap of all the cryptos, far under 1 trillion. And I mean, there were, we didn't know if we were making the right call or we were idiots, and history has proven that out. But that's, I mean, for the people that lived it, that's no small thing to realize where we've come now, and the fact that now it's going into 401ks. I think you're right. That ship has sailed. We're safe in that regard. Now, just like the stock market, any company can still go bankrupt or whatever. There, it's not to say that everything's going to be perfect and smooth sailing, but the idea that a government was going to ban it or be labeled illegal or whatever, that's a huge milestone. And for all of us OGs that lived through that, it's kind of surreal to sit here in 2025 and realize that. In the one hand, it feels like a lifetime ago, and in the other hand, it feels like just yesterday.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think it's just like the general feeling of the space, even with price, as we mentioned before. Like I had a look at XRP's price the other day, and it was 50 cents in October last year.
Yeah.
And now, people are complaining that it's under $3 right now. Like it's interesting how when the price moves and the space moves as a whole, that we kind of get used to it very quickly. I think it's just kind of in human nature. But sometimes it is really beneficial, especially for your portfolio, to take a step back and see where you've come, and see sort of where we're going, in the future. So it's as I mentioned, just a very exciting space to be in. Obviously, not everything's going to go up. We're going to have a period of most likely a bear market at some point. That'll be a great probably time to build out your portfolio for the next cycle. But it's just like anything, we see it in the economy where we have periods of booming, and then we, every once in a while we have a recession and things go back to sort of the way it was before. So I think we're in a great spot right now, but there's plenty of innovation and new use cases to come out of this space.
Yeah, well, let's maybe just go there right now then. Let's talk about price. I've got a comment here I'll flash up on the screen. I don't know if that's Katie, but I just came in. I'm told that XRP will someday be worth as much as Bitcoin. Is that true? Let's just talk about price in general here, and I'll answer that question on the screen. I may be one of the more bullish people on XRP that you'll ever meet. I've been around since it was 19 cents, or at least that's when the lowest I bought. But and I think it has a very bright future. And again, I have no financial training of any kind. I'm not a financial analyst. This is not financial advice, but I think it has certainly a 2-digit future. I don't know when that will be, but that's my personal take. Maybe long term. I don't think 3 digits is unrealistic. I don't necessarily see a point where it gets over $100,000. So, but let's just talk broadly about that, Jim, because people don't care what I think; they care what you think, because you've got the market research. Obviously, nothing moves in a straight line. Not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but what do you see? Just kind of big picture, big target, some realistic targets, maybe for the short term. Whatever short term means, but short term, I don't know, 6 to 12 months from now. Maybe let's just take the big three: XRP, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. What do you see as realistic? Again, not that it's going to be next week, but what do you think some realistic zones are? Do you think over 200,000 Bitcoin? Do you think a 2-digit XRP? Ethereum is just dying to get over 5,000. Does it hit 10? What do you think? Broad strokes.
Yeah, I would. Before I even say anything, price predictions are always fraught with danger, and I think it is difficult sometimes to
just so I don't want to put you on the spot. Maybe not even price predictions, but what are realistic ballparks that people should be thinking? Because I'm trying to get people out of the ballpark of what a comment like XRP being the same as Bitcoin. Maybe not price predictions, but realistic zones where we think can happen.
I think XRP is a tricky one because it has just such a tight-knit community. People are really big believers in the utility, and as they should be. I think it's definitely a space, as we mentioned before, which is the sort of the banking system to be disrupted. But it makes it tricky to provide that sort of price projection because people are talking about $1,000 XRPs or even hitting Bitcoin. I think it's hard to say that it's ever going to flip Bitcoin just because we don't even know what Bitcoin will be at, right? Like Bitcoin's still in its price discovery phase. I would say the chances of it happening are incredibly slim, in my opinion. Just if you look at the way in which XRP is currently already valued in terms of its market cap versus Bitcoin, the amount of supply that will still need to flow into the market. Now, that's not to say that I don't think it's a great asset to potentially hold, but I'm of the same belief of you where I think if it hits double digits in this bull cycle, I think it's done incredibly well. That'll make it, within the multiple trillions of in terms of its valuation. I think if it hits $10, I think that would be an incredibly great price for most people, and I would look to try and take some profits. But in terms of where I think it'll probably land, I think maybe sort of the 5, 6, or 7 mark. Again, I'm probably more inherently pessimistic than most, but that's kind of where I see it probably landing in this cycle. Now, that's not to say that can't, if we see that XRP gets its own ETF within the next sort of 3 months, that could really start to spur it along. We have seen ISO coins in general really outperform the market. We saw that November period once the SEC case was dropped for the first time before it went to appeal. That asset rose from 50 cents nearly to, I think it was like $2 or something overnight, right? So it has a lot of pull. It has a great utility and an area that it's trying to disrupt, which means it can overperform in the market for certain periods. But that's where I see that. In terms of Bitcoin, again, it's still in that price discovery phase, which is great. I can't personally see it going over 150K in this cycle. I think that's kind of where it will probably end up, maybe a little less, maybe a little bit more. But I think it's still got some room to run. I'm ultimately long term very bullish on Bitcoin. I can't really put a number on it, but I do think it'll be, it'll 2 times, 3 times what it's currently at. If that, within sort of the next 5 to 10 years, I could see it growing even larger. Again, none of this is financial advice. I just have a big belief in Bitcoin being that ultimate store of value over the long term. And then Ethereum, it's hovering around 4.3. Ethereum needs to hit its all-time high, as does XRP in this cycle, for me to be ultimately bullish on the asset long term. I think it will get there. It was hovering at one point around that 5K mark, which we're all looking at intently. I think it'll pass that. I think Ethereum, will probably be around either the 5 to 7K, 7.5K in this cycle. I think 10K, as much as we'd all love that, is probably a bit too far for it to run. But again, what seems too far right now at 4.3K might seem pretty easy once it's gone up. It could shoot up to 8K by the time it's December, and all of a sudden 10K is in its sights. So I think they're kind of some benchmarks. Again, I could be completely wrong. We're all kind of guessing at the end of the day. And ultimately, I think what people sometimes forget is we are very much beholden to what actually happens at a macroeconomic level within the US. You mentioned rate cuts before. That would be quite significant for the space. I think that will really start to accelerate this bull market. But we're starting to see inflation start to rise a little more than we anticipated. So if those rate cuts don't happen, that ultimately probably caps the upside in terms of this bull market. So whilst we may have our price projections on the actual asset and our belief in it, a lot of the time it does come down to, okay, what's actually happening within the economy, and where does that then lead us to, in the future, if the economy does go into a downturn in 2026. Usually risk on assets like crypto will follow those market forces, and we'll see some sort of regression in prices. But yeah, there's some price predictions. Well, not price predictions, but price sort of parameters.
Yeah,
but I'd love to hear your thoughts on them as well.
No, I think that's great. Obviously, your thoughts are more valuable than mine, but I from everything I see, everything you just said there is, I think, extremely well said and well thought out. And I think maybe on the conservative side, which is great, because what I wanted to say is, people think the hardest thing is, figuring out what to buy or when to buy it. I think the hardest part is when to sell it. And
definitely,
because you don't want to sell too early, you don't want to sell too late. But one thing that I have always thought is good advice, and it's not personalized financial advice, it's just kind of good wisdom, is nobody ever went broke taking profits. So you talk about XRP in the $5, $6, $7 range. XRP's never been higher than 384, or by some people say it was more like 350. But XRP's never been in the $4 range. So if it hits the 5, 6, 7, that's really good profits for anybody that's ever bought XRP. Maybe you bought it at 50 cents, maybe you bought it at $2, but selling at 5, 6, or 7, not a bad deal. It's not going to hurt you. It's a good deal. And Bitcoin, you said 150,000. That's also not a bad deal at all. Ethereum, 5, 6, 7,000. Pretty great for anybody that's ever bought those 3 assets. So I think that's one really good thing for people to keep in mind, is nobody ever went broke taking profits. And the other thing is, just like you can, I think it's really just generally wise wisdom when people talk about dollar cost averaging when they buy. set a weekly buy and forget it. I'm going to buy $100 of Bitcoin every week. Just turn that auto buy on and just let it dollar cost average over time, or a daily buy or whatever. You can do the same thing on selling too, right? I mean, you don't have to say, it's Tuesday and XRP's at $6. I'm going to sell the whole thing. Sell a chunk the next week, sell another chunk the following week. So I think those are great strategies for people to keep in mind as well. But Jim, I really like your price ranges. I think those are realistic ranges to think about. I don't like doing price targets either, but I do like talking about what's realistic. The question also kind of begs, I think you talked about this a little bit. Let's see here, get my settings right. This is a fun website. I'm sure you've been on this, but I don't know if other people have seen this. This is a calculator that will take one asset and tell you if it gets the same market cap of another asset, what would it be trading at? When we talk about, could XRP ever flip Bitcoin? And, when people talk about that, they're not talking about the price of XRP being higher than it. They're talking about the market cap, which is price times circulating supply. So if XRP were to get to $38, which I think is very unrealistic this cycle, maybe some point in the future, and Bitcoin had its current market value, it would flip or be higher than Bitcoin. Now, what you said and what people never seem to take into account here is, if we're living in a world where XRP has shot up to $38, it's probably likely that Bitcoin has also risen and might be 150, 200, 300. So the analysis breaks down a little bit, but it is fun to look at this in terms of, XRP doesn't need to go to $1,000 to have a larger market cap than Bitcoin. It kind of puts a little color around it. And I find that interesting to look at every once in a while.
This is I've never seen this website. So this is actually really cool to see. But it does
really
speak towards.
It's called marketcapof.com.
I'll have to check it out because I love this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's in that scenario, you've had it 13 times, which is pretty good. But I think the question before was, can XRP gets the price of Bitcoin? I think you can see from this alone that given the market cap of XRP currently, if it was to get, then that's $38 to match Bitcoin's current market cap today, which, as you rightly mentioned, look, these assets will massively overperform what their market cap is today, even XRP. But if we're just going off kind of today, for it to get to what is Bitcoin now, 114,000, you can just see how large of an asset in terms of the market cap that XRP would have to be for it to get to that. And how well it would have to perform and be like the best performing asset of all time, right? Like a 13 times is amazing. Right. I don't even know what the math is for it to get to 114,000, but you can kind of just see from that alone that, look, it's probably not going to get to that price. But I guess you'll never say never. But yeah, I think it's always worthy to do this kind of analysis. As you mentioned, I think taking profits on the way up is great. And it's not a binary event, as you mentioned, where I have to sell my entire portfolio 100% or I sell none of it. I think we're all guilty of maybe thinking about it that way. I've certainly round-tripped my own portfolio at all-time highs all the way back down. So it is worthy of thinking about, even just setting up a profit-taking strategy, whether you actually execute on it, at least having it in writing or having your mind towards it. And then when the prices do rise to that, you can then kind of go back and see where you actually thought was a good place to sell. I think is always valuable because ultimately you invest in this asset, you're a big believer in it, but there's no issues with taking profits, as you mentioned before. So something to keep in mind. You can sell 20% of that. You can sell your initial. Doesn't mean you sell out of all of it, but it is valuable to try and take profits on the way up. And that's certainly something I'll be looking to do in this cycle as well.
All right. Well, I'm going to share this for the first time ever. I don't think I've ever spoken to this, but you talk about writing down a selling plan, and I've actually done that. So I will share right now live on the air what my selling plan is, and I feel really good that I'm going to follow it. But we'll see when the time comes. We'll see what happens. But it's so funny, Jim. The reason I'm going to share it right now is because it lines up perfectly with what you said earlier. I have mapped out that my first 3 sale points are going to be in the $5 range, the $6 range, and the $7 range, because I just think we're going to hit that this cycle. I don't have a strong conviction for higher, but I've mapped out, and everyone's situation is different. I'm not going to put actual dollar numbers on it or even percentages, but what I've done is mapped out selling a bag at $5 range, $6 range, and $7 range. the percent of my current XRP holdings that I need to sell to get completely debt free, house and everything, the Dave Ramsey debt free, scream, And so that's what I've mapped out. I thought if I can do that, then I can, if I have to round trip the rest of my XRP holdings, I will. I believe it long term in their value. So I'm keeping a bigger bag because I believe in it long term, and maybe even hopefully getting some staking income along the way at some point. But there you go. That is my $5, $6, and $7 range, and I've got my numbers put out so that I can get completely debt free, and then I'm patient. I will be here and I will wait it out. So, and it's just I was smiling when you said 5, 6, and 7, Jim, because it lines up exactly with the spreadsheet that I wrote up for myself. So
yeah,
cool.
I think it's a great practice to do, Noah, just because you got it in writing, you hold yourself to that. And then, let's just say it's at $6.50 and you haven't actually sold at the $5 amount. You can always just go back to it and say, okay, well, this is what I thought was a good price. Maybe now I actually should take some of the profits at maybe an increased percentage than I had in the plan.
Yes.
It is difficult when you're in the moment to actually execute on that plan. But I always find if you write something down and you hold yourself to it, you're more likely to action upon it. So greed is a powerful thing, and I've certainly been guilty of it, as I said. When your asset and Ethereum back in the day, when it continued to rise, like you just continue to hold it, thinking it'll keep going up. At some point, it will go down again. That's just the way that these cycles work. So I think it is great to have a profit taking strategy in place like you've got.
Yeah, that's great. Well, gosh, we've been rolling here for almost an hour. I suppose we probably better wrap it up here in just a minute. If anyone has any comments that are questions that we haven't gotten to, drop them in here. But we've just been rolling and covering a lot. And probably I probably should wrap up, Jim, with how you and I got connected in the first place, which is your company, Caleb and Brown. I've been watching you guys literally since 2017 when I got into the space, and but I watched a lot of other people too. I watched Celsius and I watched FTX, and it's been a tough market. And so I watched you guys. I liked what I saw, but I waited several years, and you guys have really stood the test of time. And you have, by my estimation, one of the best and safest platforms out there. Safe storage, institutional grade storage of crypto that keeps it safe from hacks and scams and all that type of stuff. And then on top of that, a personal, when you sign up for an account, you get a personal broker that's assigned to you, that'll be the person that you talk to every time you want to do something, you want to buy, you want to sell, you want to just talk to somebody about some thoughts and see what they're seeing. And am I crazy? And, you can call them up, you can email them. And so all of that, and I finally watched and was so impressed with how you guys have stood the test of time over there that got in contact and wanted to partner up. And so that's what we did. And I had it at the top of my screen, this whole chat, but I've got a website I set up. It'll take you right to the Caleb and Brown page that looks like this. If you type in safewithnoah.com, that's SAFE, safewithnoah.com. That's going to take you, and I put safe in there because I think it's so important that the number one thing in crypto, do it safe, avoid scams, avoid all this stuff, and work with good exchanges. So if you go to safewithnoah.com, it's going to take you to this page, which is co-branded with me and with Caleb and Brown on there. So if you see a page that looks like this, you've gotten into the right place. And I'm thrilled to be partnered up with you, Jim, you and your company. And it's been great. I was trying to run the numbers before we got on here, but I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 or 700 people, starting to push closer to 1,000 here that have, after I started talking about you guys, have gone over and created an account. That's awesome. And the feedback I've gotten from those people about the process has been wonderful. Totally free to set up an account. So I'm not here trying to sell anybody on anything. I'm just trying to tell you crypto can be a dangerous landscape out there. And I'd like you to, if you want to do it safely and do it with a company you can trust, and do it with a company that is just kind of like how we've bought stocks our whole lives. You can actually call up and talk to a human being, and it's the same person every time. They will become your broker that you can talk to. They'll get to know you. They'll get to know your preferences, your experience level. Are you on the riskier side, or are you on the conservative side? How old are you? What's the right risk profile for you? What's your stage in life? Do you have a family, or do you not have a family? What do you have other holdings? They'll look at all that with you, and then they'll help you map out a personalized plan, which is really cool. So anyway, it's at the top of the screen, safewithnoah.com. It is totally free to set up an account, and hundreds, almost close to 1,000 of you have done that. And what I would encourage anyone that's hearing my voice right now to do is, crypto's exciting right now. Jim and I have been talking about it all night. It set all new all-time highs. Now for the last couple of weeks, we're down just a little bit. I think there's another very exciting wave coming. But what happens every single time, and I know I'm never going to change this psychology, so I shouldn't even try, but every single time my inbox blows up with people emailing me when Bitcoin and XRP are setting new to all-time highs. People saying, hey, you've been talking about that XRP thing for a while, and I'm kind of thinking maybe I should get some. And I'm going, guys, not at all-time highs. I mean, I think it's still going a lot higher. So, okay, but where have you been when I've been talking about it all these years? And so what I would encourage people to do, even if you don't plan to buy any right now, is just get an account set up so that you get your foot in the door. Meet your broker. All of this is free. You don't have to place a trade or transfer money in or transfer crypto in order to get access to a broker or to have that first phone call. That's completely free. You can do that. And there's only one fee ever at Caleb and Brown. Or at least right now, I don't think they have plans to add others, but there's only one fee, and you just pay a fee when you buy or sell. That's it. There's no fee for storing your crypto there. There's no fee for the broker, talking to the broker. There's no fee. They'll give you access to market research that they have. The stuff that Jim and I talked about tonight just scratches the surface. You'll get access to all of their institutional grade market research, their institutional grade custody with insurance behind it, so that nothing will happen to your crypto to be safe. They've never lost $1 of customer funds. So all of that is free. And then if you decide at some point you want to buy or sell something, then you pay a fee on that, and that's it. So Jim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I really do love talking about quality companies. I only partner up with people people and companies that I think provide something that's going to make your life better. I personally use Caleb and Brown. I have an account over there. I don't know what you want to add, but I would say the market's down a little bit right now. My inbox is not being flooded with people wanting to buy crypto at all-time highs. So if you're hearing my voice, use this opportunity, be the wise person that does all this stuff when things are not exciting, and then have fun riding it up. What do you want to add to that, Jim?
I mean, I think you covered off pretty much on every point in terms of what we do, which was great. As Noah mentioned, it is completely free to make an account, just speak to a broker. So it's not like you need to send through any money to get started. So we do recommend that if you are on the fence, at least just create an account, speak to a broker, and see if the service is right for you. Ultimately, this is a great time to get started, or at least get yourself set up to enter the market when you want, because there's nothing worse when there's significant demand. Not necessarily Calvin Brown, but it may be another platform that they aren't able to onboard you quickly enough, and all of a sudden your entry point to get into the market has gone. We've seen that over sort of the last couple of days where prices have reduced. And if you got in a great price. And now today, Ethereum's back up 4 or 5%. So that's what I would recommend. Make sure you use Noah's link, because our brokers would provide you with priority access, and make sure they give you a call. But it's the best time to get started was probably 8 years ago. The second best time to get started is today. So I would recommend, if you are new to the space, get involved, get amongst it. Use the link, and please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. But yeah, it's a great time to get started with your own personal broker with us today.
Yeah, and we've mentioned a few things tonight, Jim. Just kind of you and me. It's almost like I don't know, telling fish stories or something. Not I don't fish, but reliving what we've lived through for the past 8-10 years in crypto. But one thing you mentioned that I can personally say that I've lived through on more than one occasion is when the market does get hot. And this is before I had opened an account with you guys. I've seen it at Coinbase, other exchanges. When suddenly when you want to get in and buy something or sell something because the market's hot, they lock up. And I don't. Maybe they fix that now. Maybe it'll be better in the future. I don't know. But more than one occasion, I've not been able to log into my account on these big name exchanges because demand is too high and the servers are overloaded and sorry, try back later. That's not like, hype or fear mongering or anything. That's stuff that I lived through these past 8 years. And trust me, that's not good. So you can, Caleb and Brown does not go down. If their website ever did go down, you can still call or email your broker. So you have constant access. So you can always place those trades. That's a really big deal that we shouldn't gloss over, because that is incredibly frustrating and scary too when you can't log in. It's like, are my funds still there? Yeah. Did they go out of business? Is this the next one to go bankrupt, or is their server just overloaded? You don't always know in the moment, and that's a panic moment. Let me tell you, I've lived through that. So that's one thing I would tell you, that you mentioned, Jim, but that's a really big deal. Is just that constant access without downtime is huge. And then the other thing I would tell people is get an account set up. And after you set it up, there's a second step that you have to go through. I've gotten some emails on this. I don't love this either, but just understand this is not a Caleb and Brown thing. This is a U.S. regulation thing. You have to do what's called KYC. You have to fill out, upload your driver's license, verify your identity. Everybody's going to make you do that. I've had a few people email me saying, oh gosh, I don't like this, but that is unavoidable. And if you're any company you're working with that is not making you do that, it may not be reputable, and they're definitely not following regulations. So look, guys, I hate it too. Every time I just have to, bite my tongue and upload the ID and do it. And I absolutely hate it. I feel like it's a violation of privacy, but that is not a Caleb and Brown thing. That's even a stock market account, right? I mean, you can't go open a Charles Schwab account without doing that stuff. So that is the second step in this. And you want to do that step too right now, while things are down a little bit, things are a little boring right now. Get all that verification done. Even if you don't have plans that you want to buy or sell anything, next week or next month, just get it all done so that you're ready to go, because your plans might change, and you might, when the market gets hot again, it gets so exciting. So I would say do those two steps, get those two things done, get the account opened and set up, talk to your broker, and then do all the verification, upload the ID, do all that stuff. And then you are totally 100% ready to go. The other thing is, you guys, I've mentioned this before, but you guys are growing like crazy. You were just acquired by another company. It's business as usual. It just means more resources and better customer service. But the growth has been incredible with you guys. I think over 37,000 customers worldwide, active in 100 and plus countries. And those numbers are probably outdated at this point. But when you think about 37,000 customers and everybody gets assigned their own personal broker, I don't know that signups are going to be always open and free, in the future. And that's why I use the phrase, get your foot in the door, because, they have to hire a lot of staff to keep up with this growing demand, and they're doing a great job, and they're staying on it. But, I've definitely seen companies that are growing fast, and experiencing exponential growth. Sometimes they have to turn off signups for a while or turn off new accounts. I don't have any inside knowledge that could happen, but I've just seen it happen. So that's why I say get your foot in the door. It's free. I'm not doing this show to sell you anything for that. I'm not saying go write them a check or go get out your credit card. What I'm telling you to do is totally free. So I hope you take advantage of that. And like I said, I love giving stuff to people, that talking about things that are going to make your life better. And I am confident that Caleb and Brown is a great option in the crypto space. So how's that for a wrap up, Jim? Should we end it right there? We'll have you back on again soon. I think we're trying to make an effort of doing this maybe once a month. Just have you on, do an Ask Me Anything, talk about where the market's going. And I think this was a ton of fun tonight. I'd love to have you on again in the future. Sound good to you?
Sounds good to me. Thanks for having me back on. A lot of fun. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, you can reach out to me on my Twitter, which is Jimmy_Baz, or you can email me at jim@calebandbrown.com. But thanks for having me back on, Noah, and excited to do another one of these in the future.
Excellent. All right, everybody. The website is safewithnoah.com. Make sure you get in the right place. Look for that co-branding at the top of the page, and we will see you next time. All right. Bye.
Bye.